Good afternoon. My name is Joe Esquivel, and on behalf of the U.S. Equity Initiative Private Member Association, I want to welcome you to today's webinar on MERS, which stands for Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems Incorporated. First off, I'd like to start off with our disclaimer. 1. Legal information is not the same as legal advice. This site provides entertainment and educational information about law, designed to help users safely cope with their own legal needs. But legal educational information is not the same as legal advice. The application of law varies with an individual's specific circumstances. The laws of every state are in constant change, and although we go to great lengths to make sure that our information is accurate and useful, we recommend that you consult with a lawyer if you want professional assurance that our information and your interpretation of it is appropriate to your particular situation. So, with that being said, let's get started. When I look at MERS, I see MERS differently. I see MERS as a big iceberg floating out there in the ocean like the one that hit the Titanic. What most people see is about 10% of the iceberg. What they fail to see is that 90% of the iceberg is below water, and that is what will hurt you. That is what sank the Titanic. So let's get started on this iceberg. 1. MERS. MERS stands for Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems. Okay. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. In 1993 is when a task force was created to head up looking at alternatives. When we look at this, you can see that the CEO that was heading up this task force was Angelo Mozillo. So he was president of the Mortgage Bankers Association and president and CEO of Countrywide. And when we look at some of the people that were on the committee, we had William Clevey, Chief Information Officer for Fannie Mae. We had Paul Peterson, Senior Vice President, Freddie Mac. Kenneth Tucker, Deputy Director of the FHA, Federal Housing Authority. So when we look at this, this is something that took a lot of planning. A lot of planning. In addition, they also filed this with the Securities Exchange Commission. This is a copy of the actual registration where you can see that in August of 2003, they actually filed. And when you look at description of business, National Mortgage Rights Registry, that's what it's saying. Look at the parties that were involved: Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Mortgage Bankers Association of America. All of these parties were all part of the criminal element that went to putting forth all this information. Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems Incorporated is a privately owned company and a wholly owned subsidiary of MERS Corp. Inc. Now, MERS, Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems Inc., serves as mortgagee in a nominee capacity for the lender and subsequent assignees. MERS Holdings Incorporated is a privately held Delaware corporation that operates the nationwide electronic registry for tracking interest in mortgage loans as they move through the securitization pipeline. The original name was MERS Corp. Inc., and they changed it on February 27th of 2012. In 2012, they merged MERS Corp Holdings and MERS Corp Inc. together. So this is the company that actually does the tracking and that operates this electronic registry. This is the actual company. So it's very confusing, and most people do not even understand that. There are multiple companies involved. Multiple companies involved. Let's continue. The National Registry is intended to satisfy the requirements of UE-ETA and e-sign for electronic notes only. Electronic notes only. Attempting to provide functionality for paper note tracking would greatly complicate the design and implementation of the National Registry. The function of the MERS registry is a system that electronically tracks transferable records, also known as electronic promissory notes, that are created, generated, sent, communicated, received, and stored by electronic means. Let's start with the tangible promissory note. A tangible promissory note is a piece of paper that can be touched, that contains the promise to pay. But the real significance is not the physical paper, but the legal rights which the paper confers. And hence, the promissory note is defined by the legal debt. This debt or promise to pay is also called the intangible obligation. MERS does not track the paper promissory note. MERS only tracks electronic obligations or e-notes that are registered on the MERS e-registry. Why? Because MERS is electronic. MERS is limited to only electronic notes and not paper notes. When we look at 50,000 feet, you don't see that all the time. So we're going to take an in-depth look at some more information. What is an e-note? Well, an e-note, okay, they are privately labeled secondary electronic obligations called transferable records. Transferable records are governed by Article 8, and the security interest securing those transferable records are governed by UCC Article 9, as those security interests are personal property, not real property. So not to confuse you, the security interest, meaning the personal property that is securing those transferable records, all right, are personal property. That's not real property. The function of a transferable record is an electronic equivalent of a negotiable instrument, but it is only used in the electronic world of e-mortgages. A transferable record is not a UCC Article 3 instrument. If we were to go to UCC Section 9.102 under their definition and index of definitions for the Uniform Commercial Code, it states in Section 47, instrument means negotiable instrument or any other writing that evidences a right to the payment of a monetary obligation and is not itself a security agreement or lease and is of a type that in ordinary course of business is transferred by delivery with any necessary endorsement or assignment. The term does include 1, investment property, 2, letters of credit, 3, writings that evidence a right to payment arising out of the use of a credit or charge card or information contained on or for use with the card or for non-negotiable certificates of deposits. E-mortgage. What is an e-mortgage? We hear that term a lot. Well, at the Mortgage Bankers Association, they state, quote, "We define an e-mortgage as a mortgage where the critical loan documentation, at a minimum, the promissory note and preferably the security instrument, and other closing docs are created electronically, executed electronically, transferred electronically, and stored electronically, aka the paperless mortgage." That is what the Mortgage Bankers Association says that an e-mortgage is. An e-mortgage is a copy of the tangible contract that evidences an alternative means of collection when there is a default on the payment intangible. Remember that word. It is a copy. To properly negotiate a lawful secured indebtedness up to Wall Street or to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, you need a paper promissory note, which is a negotiable instrument, along with a valid, perfected paper security instrument. Naming MERS as nominee does not meet the definition of lender. Naming MERS as beneficiary bifurcated the paper security instrument from the paper negotiable instrument at the moment of conception, because we know that electronic documents lack supporting laws to exist. Let's go to 15 U.S.C.-96-1-7003 of the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, which states specific exceptions. So these are exceptions to the 15 U.S.C. 7003A, except the requirements. The provisions of Section 7001 of this title shall not apply to a contract or other record to the extent it is governed by Section 3, the Uniform Commercial Code, as in effect in any state other than Sections 1-107 and 1-206 and Articles 2 and 3A. So what this is stating is that the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act does not apply to anything that is governed by the Uniform Commercial Code, with the exception of 1-107, 1-206, Articles 2 and 2A. So it doesn't apply to the tangible promissory note. It does not. The above noted exception clearly states e-sign does not govern electronic negotiable instruments or an electronic security instrument. Fact is that the UCC 4, actually it's UCC 3, governs paper negotiable instruments and paper security instruments. The UCC does not provide support in law for the use of any electronic negotiable instrument or an electronic security instrument. Therefore, any attempts by the bank to utilize the Uniform Commercial Code as a legal authority before the courts in an attempt to show that the Uniform Commercial Code has legal governance over electronic negotiable instruments or electronic security instruments is misplaced. Now, if you were to go to the Freddie Mac Mortgage Guide, eMortgage Guide version 2.0, here's what it states on page 12. Quote, servicer, seller must also comply with the applicable purchase documents and make the representations and warranties in this eMortgage Guide, including, without limitation, that any e-note sold to Freddie Mac will be valid and enforceable, and that other electronic records created, provided, signed, or otherwise processed using the e-closing system were so created, provided, signed, or processed in compliance with applicable state and federal law. Wait a minute, it just says that in compliance with applicable state and federal law. So they're stating with Freddie Mac that they need to follow the law, something that they haven't done in quite a while. When we look at the stated on page 12 to the Guide to Delivering E-Mortgage Loans to Fannie Mae, version 2.5, it states, 2.1, Overview. An e-mortgage is a mortgage for which the promissory note and possibly other documents, such as the security instrument and the loan application, are created and stored electronically rather than by using traditional paper documentation that has a pen and ink signature. Because of the limited number of recording jurisdictions that accept electronic documents for recordation, and most, but not all, e-mortgages typically consist of a paper security instrument and an electronic e-note. Now, it further states, as stated on page 5 of the Guide to Delivering E-Mortgage Loans to Fannie Mae version 2.5, paragraph 2.2, initial and periodic assessments. Each lender is responsible for determining that it meets the legal, there's that word, legal, technological, and operational requirements necessary to create valid and enforceable mortgage obligations, and that it otherwise complies with our requirements, which in some cases may be in addition to minimum statutory requirements. So they're stating even within Fannie Mae's own documents that it must meet the legal and enforceable mortgage obligations, and it complies with the minimum statutory requirements. But yet nobody follows up. They don't do what is required. And the courts are not enforcing this. E-docs pertain to personal property and not real property. So when we look at the big picture, we're seeing more and more of this information is below the waterline that nobody has ever touched. Let's look at actual information that is put out by MERS. So this wasn't created by anyone else other than Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems Incorporated. MERS Basics, registration versus recording. The MERS system is not a system of legal record, nor a replacement for the public land records. Mortgages must be recorded in the public land records. That's what it says. Bullet point 2, tracking versus transfer. The MERS system is a tracking system. No interests are transferred on the system, only tracked. Okay, so I guess those assignments are just worthless that they're doing. Let's look at MERS' own definitions. On the left, we have the paper world. On the right, we have got the electronic world. Paper world, we say possession. Electronic world, they say control. Two different things. Paper world, we say original note with the wet signature. Electronic world, they say authoritative copy of e-note. In the paper world, we say investor. Electronic world, they say controller. These are night and day differences, people. Night and day. They are not the same. Again, this is information put out by MERS. MERS also states, key assumption used in development. Industry investors will require e-note registration. E-note must specifically refer to the MERS e-registry. Participants must be members of MERS. The registry does not store e-notes. Multiple e-vaults will be created to store the e-notes. And funding of loans occurs outside the registry. What's different? Major difference. They're creating e-notes, they're executing e-notes, they're storing e-notes, they're delivering e-notes. They again transfer e-notes, they service e-notes. And they're using a e-registry to record all of these steps. That doesn't sound anything like the tangible world of the tangible instrument. Night and day difference. Look at the difference as to what actually takes place when you look at the e-note docs and the paper docs. For the paper docs, we have external docs. Electronically, they have an e-note. You have origination and underwriting for paper. You have e-note disclosure. We have doc prep for the tangible. We have e-note review for the electronic. We have a recording for the tangible. We don't have any recording for the e-note. We have closing for the tangible. They call it e-signing on an e-closing platform. We have document custody for the tangible. They have an e-vault. These are from MERS. Everything I'm showing you, the last couple of slides have been from MERS. I haven't made this up. So when we look at 30,000 feet, you're starting to notice there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. We've got this little iceberg off to the right. This little iceberg is important. It's hidden by MERS. It's called the County Recorder's Office. And why is this so important? Well, let me show you. This is how things used to be done prior to MERS. Let's take a look at all of the transactions and all of the parties. When you look at the green lines, which talk about the transfer of money, all the gold lines, which are orange, which talks about the transfer of services, and the purple, which talks about the transfer of documents, you notice that up on top we have the borrower, and the purple is showing the transfer of documents every time. What happens? Lender makes a sale. Okay, what else happens? Security instrument made to County Recorder's Office. Again, every time there is an assignment that's recorded, there's a sale of the note. Again, there's a transaction to follow the note and public record. The note is sold, there's a record of it. The note is sold, there's a record of it. The intangible has also followed this. So we have multiple parties that are involved. Transfer of services, okay? We have all of these services that are involved up here. So when you look at all of these green lines are recording fees. Every time something is done, there's a recording fee, there's an administration fee. This is what was done prior to MERS on a regular basis. And it was done in accordance with law, and these loans did make it to the trust in time. This is what the banks are saying is a waste of time and money. They're saying we don't need all of these services. We don't need to pay all of this money. This is what we are not going to do. And so they haven't. So everything that is X'd out in red is where the banks are cutting back and saying, well, we don't need to disclose all of this. This is money that we can keep in our pockets. Why should we pay this? Regardless that it has been in place since the 1700s. This is what they actually do. A lot simpler now. That looks nothing like this one here. They've cut out all of the parties that were involved. So oftentimes we just have recording one time. Boop, that's it. When you understand that what is happening is all of these transactions that used to take place no longer take place. It's a shell game is what has taken place. It's a big shell game. Very, very few transactions are taking place pursuant to statutory requirements of law. This is what is not happening, people. You can print out these, take your time, and go through them. There is no comparison. MERS is not a party to the note, and it's conferred no rights. One cannot assign what one has never received. Now, when we step back, again, you've seen the little iceberg to the right, which is the county recorder's office, which plays a role. But you see the little iceberg to the left? To the left of this big MERS iceberg, it's called title. Title is everything, people. Title is what we talk about. Title is a union of all elements, constituting the legal right to control and dispose of property. Title is a legal link between a person who owns property and the property itself. Title is a legal evidence of a person's ownership rights or interests in the property. Title is a manner in which the right to real property is acquired, the conditions necessary to acquire a valid claim to land. Title is the right itself, the legal consequences of such conditions. That's what we're talking about. Have you acquired rights? There is only one statute in which one can acquire rights to a negotiable instrument, and that is under Article 3-203. And that applies for all 49 states. The 50th state, being the state of New York, goes to their own codified version of the 1961 Uniform Commercial Code, and they use 3-202. So for normally 3203, subsection A would tell you what could be done, and then sections B, C, and D would place restrictions on how it is to be done. Everything that we're talking about, people, is all about title. Have you acquired proper title? Have you acquired legal right to control and dispose of property? And my answer to that is no, they have not. So I hope today's understanding from 30,000 feet, you can see that 90% of that iceberg now, you actually know it's there. The MERS registry holds a list of parties who should have been in the chain of title as secured parties, but the first subsequent intervening party failed to permanently perfect their interest of record. And as these intervening parties bought and sold that interest, often within a day's time, all were under the belief that they had a perfected interest. So every time they bought and sold their electronic interest, they were all under the belief that they have a perfected interest. That couldn't have been further from the truth. So today, I ask you to do your due diligence and stay on the lookout for foreclosure crimes. I've enjoyed the afternoon with you. If you have any questions, I would ask that you go to our website, which is up on your screen, or you can drop us an email. So you can email us at info@usequityinitiative.com, and you can also go to our website should you have any questions. Thank you for your time. Have a nice day.